You can all join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Good to see you all. Anyone here for the first time? You want to share why they're here for the first time now that I've already got your hand in the air? That was a big no. Anybody else want to share why they're here for the first time?
My daughter has brought me here this morning.
And what does she tell you?
Just come and check it out and enjoy.
Nice. It's a good daughter you have there. She does a lot around here. What else? Anyone here for the first time? Want to share why? Anyone who keeps coming back, why? Why do you keep showing up? I mean, I've been saying the same thing for 10 years, so I should have learned it all by now. Why come back? Why show up?
Community.
Community? What else?
Forced relaxation.
Forced relaxation.
I know
That's an interesting way to put it.
But it
Yes.
means that it's a place for an hour of the
Yes.
week. I'm just relaxing and trying not to think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. It was yesterday. We had a visit from USD students, and they're religious studies students, and most of them pretty new to Buddhism. So I spent about an hour and a half with them. But one of them, prior to meditation, I asked them what their thoughts were about it, and he said that he meditates so he can then attack his day. And so when you just said forced relaxation, it just reminded me of that. And I said to them, and I shared, and I'll try to describe it, and then we'll sit. But there's all those funny memes going on around there, and there's one of this cat, and the cat is sitting there, mala beads on and full lotus and looking all, cat-like. And it says something to the effect of, allow the red dot to come to you. And I just thought it was one of the most brilliant things I've ever seen. Because it's funny, we have to force ourselves to relax. There's 23 other hours in a day. But we have to get up, we have to get out of the house, we have to get in the car, we have to get in the traffic, probably not too much now. We have to drive here, we have to find a place to park, we have to get in, we have to take our shoes off, we have to go through all that stuff just to sit down here for 60 minutes to actually relax. And ironically enough, that's the same reason a lot of people have been showing up all this time because we just don't create that time and space in our lives to relax on our own outside of a place like this. So the message is hopefully take some of the other 23 hours you have in your day and use that as time to, I guess, force yourself to relax if at all possible. Because life can get pretty hectic at times. So with that, we'll start a meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Not going to float away. You won't have any mystical, magical experiences, right? The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. Meaning, don't ask yourself, is this working? Is it not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You're going to hear sounds, right? Sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos and sounds, and the practice of meditation is not escaping from it, but learning to get quiet and still within all of the sounds. Don't expect anything. Don't judge your practice. Don't ask yourself if it's working or not. We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe, all right? Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten slightly. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on the chairs or benches, also just trying to sit up straight. Relaxing the shoulders, hands are on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move, simply move. Doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, they'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around you or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada. It means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for every one of us in this room, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. more stuff happens, more reactions. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not necessarily easy. It's not always fun. But meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to become aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do, and how that impacts you and those around you. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything that's outside of us, hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing this would happen, wishing that would happen, why did this happen, why did that happen? So much time focused on everything outside of us. And the reason this practice is so challenging is it is really about getting still, getting quiet, and looking within yourself. I always say Buddhist practice is just like holding up a mirror. Much of our lives we spend running from the mirror. So we look in the mirror, we don't like what we see. And this practice is learning to be with what's in that mirror. And that's yourself. Now the good thing is in Buddhism, Buddha said there is no self, so you don't have to worry about that so much. Right? All that means is that you are very different from how you perceive yourself to be. And you are very different from everybody else's perceptions of you as well. So don't get too wrapped up in what you think of yourself or what others think of you. Look at the intention behind what you think, what you say, and what you do. You know, as a part of the meditation, and I say the same thing every time, but during the meditation I say, becoming aware of what you think, or the sounds you hear, right? Becoming aware of your thoughts, and becoming aware of physical sensations. And one of the reasons I say that during meditation is that when we are actually finally settled and quiet and still, we can then actually kind of check in and pay attention to, what am I thinking? What am I hearing? And what am I feeling? Maybe my back hurts. Maybe my knee hurts. Maybe my heart hurts. Maybe I hear pleasant sounds. Maybe I hear unpleasant sounds. Maybe I like the sound of running water, but I don't like the sound of a skateboard. Maybe I like the sound of birds chirping, but I don't like the sound of a car honking. All of these things, the sounds and the thoughts and the feelings, are just what's actually happening. And the practice is to become aware of that and not get driven so much by them. Everything we hear, we don't like it, we fight against it. Everything we feel, we don't like it, we run from it. Everything we think, we don't always like that, so we just try to escape from our thoughts and get lost in something. And this is a cycle that unfortunately repeats throughout most of our lives. And so at the very beginning, and I really would consider all of us in this room beginners, it is about becoming aware and how driven we are by our senses. And that's, if you've never read the Heart Sutra, that's what the Heart Sutra is. Becoming aware of how much our senses drive us. And learning to guard them and control them. So we stop running so much. Plus, if we keep running around, that little red dot's never going to find us. So I'd rather just stop there and open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. I always prefer to address that. Because once I start talking about cats and red dots, who knows where it's going to go. Yeah. thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So I'm thinking about when I meditate and what you were just saying about noticing thoughts and sensations and feelings. And what I try to do is like label it. Like if I notice a thought, instead of getting caught up in it, I'll think the thought, just a thought. So that I can release it.
Sure.
And then notice the next one, which is like milliseconds away. And then it's really tough to stay away from it. One of the things you always say, which is don't judge your practice, because that stream is so continuous.
Yeah.
So something about what you're saying here about notice what you're thinking gets me caught up in thinking about thinking.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Well said. So there's a couple things that I'll just say to give you more to think about when you're thinking about the thinking that's occurring during your meditation. A couple things. First, I'll start with this. There's a lot of different ways to meditate and a lot of different ways that are shared to meditate. And for the most part, they're all pretty good. The important part is putting it into practice, finding one that resonates with you and doing it. And the labeling of it is a practice I've heard over the years quite a lot. Someone used to lead downtown years ago, and he had this practice where he would say every time he had a thought, like his hands would be on his knees, right? And every time he had a thought, his finger would just tap his knee. And it's kind of the same idea. There was a thought, so he would tap his knee to recognize the thought. And then that was his way of kind of releasing the thought. And so one time I sat there and I was up front, and my eyes were open when I meditated anyway, so I could see his hand on his knee. And he just sat there for 20 minutes tapping his knee, right? Like constant thinking. The challenge is the reason that one would label a thought, or I say come back to the present moment and don't, give power to the thoughts, is that so that you don't create the story. That if I have, again, for anyone who might be newer or new to the space, if I have an unpleasant thought, right? Example I always give, I have a thought arises, say it's hunger. Recognize hunger, release it, back to breath. Next thought, hunger. Recognize hunger, label it, call it hunger, whatever you want. Release it, back to breath. This is what I'm working on. What I want to practice is coming to the present moment. What I don't want to do, hunger. I'm hungry. I want to eat. What do I want to eat? I want a burrito. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go to Pokies. I want chips. I want sauce. So one single thought of hunger, and I'm sitting there for 5 minutes thinking about eating a burrito. It's not the end of the world, except now I'm hungrier than I was 5 minutes ago, right? So the idea is, can we not create the stories in our head? And, quite frankly, creating the story of thinking about not thinking is probably better than the stories that we typically create in our head all day long. Anyone have a thought that, has happened in your mind and, 7 years later, you're still angry about it? That's a really long meditation practice. 7 years of something that happened and you're still angry, right? So the thought of thinking about thinking is probably a little more pleasant than other thoughts, but also not what we're trying to do. I used this metaphor yesterday, and I didn't know where it came from afterwards. I was like, wow, that was actually pretty good. It was funny to me. This kid asked a question after one of the college kids, and he was talking about judging his meditation practice, and he has a regular practice, right? And he was holding a water bottle, as everybody under the age of 20 does. And so I'm listening to him, and all of a sudden this thought came to my head, and I said, when you take a drink of your water, do you compare that to the last drink of water you had? He said, no. I said, are you thinking about the next drink of water you're going to have? No. Because what I was saying to him was, every time you do a meditation, sit down and do it as if you've never done it before. This is the beginner mind. This is the Zen practice, beginner mind. Everything is as if you've never done it before, because you never have. Right? Even if you do something repetitively over and over and over again, you are not that same person that is doing that thing over and over and over again. You've had different experiences, different observations, different feelings, different emotions, right? Every time you eat food, you're eating differently, right? So when he drinks the water, he just takes a drink and that's it, he's done. But for some reason, when he meditates, he sits there, he's like, okay, how is this meditation compared to the last one? How is this thought compared to the last one? So every time you sit and do a meditation, sit as if you've never done it before. Every time you have a thought, recognize it's a thought as if you've never had one before. And try not to have that thought lead to the story. The thoughts are not the terrible things. It's the 20 minutes or 20 years of stories that we tell ourselves over and over and over that torture us. One thought's just one thought. Try not to give it so much power over you. Otherwise, you'll be doing that your whole life, as many of us in this room have, which is the reason many of us are here. You know? So, just some more thoughts.
But I like that, Jeff, that was helpful because there's a big difference between having a thought and having that be neutral
Mm-hmm.
and going to occur
Correct.
versus getting caught up in a story because I'm one.
Yes, and that's where, you know, what I learned from Buddhist teachings is, you know, the feelings, the thoughts, these emotions, they're kind of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And so we always have pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral thoughts. Pleasant, you know, those are nice, but those also aren't going to stay forever. So if you get wrapped up in pleasant thoughts, when something unpleasant happens, you're really not going to be ready for it. And if you spend all your time in unpleasant thoughts, well, that just sucks. And so the practice is, can I just be neutral with thoughts that are just neutral, you know? And then your whole life is going to have all of those. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I was just going to say too that there's a difference for me between labeling the thought, which helps, and ignoring it.
Sure.
Ignoring it makes it stay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, without getting too like into the head so much, I mean, ignoring it is also still even kind of like a label, because there's a thought I'm going to ignore, so I've labeled it as the thought I'm going to ignore. You know, I don't know why I said that, but yeah.
I'll ignore that.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Other thoughts, questions?
Thinking of your description of the cat and the red dot, I'm sitting here and I see this cushion right here, and there's a red dot
Yeah.
right there. So is that a good omen?
The scary thing is that that's how much I understand this place. I know exactly where that red dot came from. Yeah, that's the crazy thing. I wouldn't call it an omen. I would just call it your karma, which is you sat down in that seat, the karma of that cushion, which meant that cushion ended up there, and the karma of the cushion and the Carmen of Gordon collided.
So in order to keep this good karma, do I take this?
You can have it.
Texas with me?
Yes. Since it was your birthday yesterday, consider it a birthday gift. You know? Yeah, that, you know, the cushion was, when the downstairs was painted red, the cushion was there. And you can figure out the rest. But it's interesting about, you know, it's funny how you say omen, or often when people talk about, well, things happen for reasons, right? And I always talk about that it's just karma. We want to give meanings to things. It's what we're just conditioned to do. We've been doing that our whole lives. We create stories about why a thing is happening, especially unpleasant things. Anytime anything unpleasant happens in our lives, psychologically, very often, we have been conditioned, taught, trained to try to make something good out of it, right? To put a positive spin on it. Well, this must be happening for a reason. Things just happen. We can put all the stories and spins and justifications on them that we want, but it doesn't change the fact that you just sat down and that cushion's there. But the crazy thing is, the trillion conditions that have occurred, right? My dear friend Anoka used to say, all we are is a trillion conditions occurring over a trillion years. So all of the things that have happened in your life, from child, just starting with birth, forget what happened prior to you being born that brought you here, right? Just in your life, all of the things that have happened every moment of your entire life, for you to be sitting right now on that cushion is ridiculous, right? That's why I was talking yesterday to college kids saying that is a psychedelic experience, right? That is crazy that you're sitting there. And then you look at the life of that cushion. The name Robert Frank mean anything to you? No. Doesn't mean anything to you. You don't know him. You'll probably never meet him. But without someone like him, that cushion wouldn't be sitting there right now. Jerry Jones, that name, other than Dallas Cowboys owner, mean anything to you? No, there's a different Jerry Jones from this community. He painted the whole place, right? Without Jerry Jones and Robert Frank and that cushion and red paint that was picked up at Home Depot and everything that happened in your life, that one little moment could never happen. And the importance of this is to remind us how incredibly fortunate we are to even be alive and have these experiences that we have. They don't have to mean grand things, but appreciate them when they're there because they're phenomenal, right? How fortunate we are to even just be alive and have these crazy experiences that we have. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? I got it. Took 13 years, but you finally figured it all out. What else?
This is a heavy lifter, I think, but can you say something about whatever aspect of Buddhism speaks to how to skillfully approach illness?
Yeah, so the question, if you didn't hear in the back, was, can I say something about whatever aspect of Buddhism speaks to how to skillfully approach illness? Is that correct? Yeah. I think that what I've learned from Buddhist practice, and especially for me as a Zen practitioner, is to be incredibly present with things as they are. And you've probably heard me say this before, but Buddhist practice doesn't make things easier. It doesn't fix things, and this is for everybody really. It doesn't solve things. If one is unhealthy, Buddhist practice won't necessarily make you healthy, right? If one is ill, Buddhist practice won't necessarily make you no longer ill. But what Buddhist practice does is it allows you to be very present with things as they are. And again, just because, when you sit with 40 college kids who are basically brand new to Buddhism, other than maybe a semester's worth of dabbling in it from an academic standpoint, it's incredible discussions and questions. But afterwards, somebody yesterday said, I was talking about impermanence. And I said, the fact that every one of us in this room right now at some point is going to be gone. I said, the shoes we have, the places we live, the cars we drive, the transportation we use, everything, including us, will be gone someday. And she said, doesn't that stress you out? I said, no, not at all. It's actually quite beautiful to finally embrace the fact that that's what's going to happen. It is the resistance of that causes the stress and pain and suffering, right? The Buddha taught that we will all, once we are born, we will all age, We will all get sick, and we will all die. That is what occurs. The stress comes from the resistance of that and the denial of that. So then the comment back was, well, that sounds kind of depressing. Well, that's what happens. Again, we can call it what we want, but the reality is we will age, right? I used to say we will get old, but not so, right? We age. We will experience illness and we will die. So the real lesson to me as a practitioner there is, if I know that is the case, I'm not going to waste any moment of my life doing things that are meaningless, that are a waste of time, that are just feeding my arrogance and ego. I'm not going to waste any time being angry, being depressed, being miserable, because we don't know when that moment comes. Sure, sometimes we observe others get ill and we think that, okay, the time is coming near. And then there are people that in that moment are just gone. So regardless of what journey an individual takes to the point that it ends, we don't know when that is. So start now, fully embracing and appreciating everything. And look at what really matters in life. And think about all the time and energy and effort and money and whatever that we spend on things that are just, they mean nothing. You know? So I think all of Buddhism addresses this, you know, regardless of what school you're looking at. I think it really comes back to the heart of Buddhist teachings about understanding impermanence. It happens to all of us, and having endless gratitude and appreciation for everything we have. And just think of all the little petty things that you're going to get angry about today. Think of all the things. I mean, it's not even noon yet. Do you know how many things are going to piss you off today? They're going to frustrate you because your sandwich wasn't cooked properly, or your latte didn't have enough pumps of whatever in it, you know, or your car got a little scratch on it. The littlest things that just drive us insane, that mean for the most part absolutely nothing. And there are things in our life that do mean things, and these are a little bit harder to deal with. But the little things, don't waste time on them. Yeah. Yeah. Other thoughts, questions? We showed a movie last night. It was really great. And we have them here if anyone wants to borrow them, but there were three. It was a 30-minute, 30-minute, and 60-minute. So there were three films, Tibetan themed, basically, Tibetan Buddhist themed. And the last one was about a Tibetan Lama. And it was at the very end. And I said, often I say the very last thing was my favorite because I'm usually not watching it. And I come back in and I catch like 60 seconds of it. And I'm like, that was my favorite thing in the film. But I actually watched the whole 2 hours of it, and this really was my favorite thing in the film. And at the very end, he said something about the fact, he said he was in his little, I mean, it was a room maybe this size. And he said, none of this is mine. It was in a monastery, you know. And he said, none of this is mine. He said, I have these simple clothes. I have a little simple food to eat, right? But I tell, and he was referencing the other kind of lamas, he said, I tell them all the time, they can deal with this stuff. They can have it. I don't want anything. I have my simple clothes. I have my simple food. I have a few things, you know, he had a little shelf. He said, and I'm happy. And the real question is, how many of us can look honestly and ask ourselves, am I happy? and then look at what we've been doing our whole lives and how we've been conditioned to think our whole lives and what we think is going to bring us happiness. And if you haven't learned yet, please start to learn that the things that most of us think are going to bring us happiness are actually not the things that bring us happiness. He was free from the attachment of all these physical things that we think bring us so much happiness. So, we've all been there, and some more than others. If I just have this house or this car or this job or this relationship or this amount of money or this anything, I just have these things and these people and these places, then happiness is going to be there. It's in your mind, it's in your heart. What else? We'll do one more and then we'll close. Yeah.
I have a friend who's fond of the emaciated Buddha, and I can't find one anywhere.
Yeah.
Did you guys get yours from Buddha for You?
Yeah, so I the funny thing is, I shared this last night because actually one of the 30-minute films was on the art of tanka making. And I've seen various parts, pieces, live and on video of tanka making, but the way this 30-minute piece was put together on tankas was incredible. But so we were talking about tankas and statues and things afterwards. And yes, 13 years ago, before we were Buddha for You, we were going to open up this little thing called the Dharma Bum Temple in 2006. We had this crazy idea thinking it might work. Not quite sure if it has or not yet, but and we went into Buddha for You and we bought this emaciated Buddha, that tanka in the back corner there, the 1,000-armed Kuan Yin, and same thing with the one above the exit sign. Yeah, Alfred, the old owner, gave us a great deal. But yeah, they all came from Buddha for You. The emaciated Buddhas are not that common, but I have some connections, so we'll see if we can get you one. Yeah. And for those who don't know, and I'll close with this thought, the emaciated Buddha, which sits behind us, I'll give a shorter version because we're just about out of time. But when the Buddha was on his journey, left home as a prince at 29 and roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And they thought at that time that if they overcame their attachment to physical form, that would be their way to awaken. And so they would starve themselves. And it said they ate 1 grain of rice a day. And he was so skinny you could take your fingers front to back and that they would actually touch. And so he came to a riverbed and someone offered him food. And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing this, he said, "I'm hungry." Something to that effect. And they were like, no, we can't eat. And they offered him food. And he said, well, I'm going to put the bowl in the stream. And if the bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So the bowl went against the stream and he started to eat. And he regained his physical health. And the other 5 guys, they left him, his buddies. They were like, you sell out, you food eater, you traitor. So they left him and he went on and he regained his physical health. And then they saw him later and he was sitting. And that's actually what that image above the exit sign is. It's him giving his first teaching at Deer Park to the 5 disciples that left him. And they came back and they're like, oh, there's Siddhartha Gautama. It looks like he's figured something out. Let's go sit with him. And he began to teach the 4 Noble Truths, which that image represents the first turning of the Dharma wheel at Deer Park. That's why you have the deer running in the background. And so he taught the 4 Noble Truths, and then he taught for 45 years, and he died at 80. But the main idea behind the emaciated Buddha is that when we picked the statue, that was us, 13 years ago, started this little place, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, near death. And it was very encouraging to us that, if this one guy, Siddhartha Gautama, could be near death, and in the same lifetime, he could figure out how to overcome suffering, that was hopeful for us. That instead of sitting with this already enlightened Buddha that like we're trying to become, and I always talk about the mirror, I've been bound to the statue for 13 years, and that's what in my mind I'm seeing, that's me. Not like literally me, but that is us, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, at times near death. And we cannot overcome suffering unless we understand why we are suffering. So he was suffering there. He understood it. He started to eat. His suffering at that moment in time was physical. Begin to understand what our suffering is. Sometimes, yes, it is physical. And sometimes there's not much you can do about physical pain and suffering. But a majority of the suffering that we go through is not physical. It's mental, emotional. So become aware of those things so you can actually work through them. So that's what this statue reminds me of us. So, yeah, with that, we'll join palms. And the benefit of this practice, we share with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most.